Welcome to Lab 20 Day 10. Now this lab is going to be a big lab, and from here really our application is going to go and rise very higher. So be ready for this ride, and my suggestion would be, if you're thinking of doing this practical and you are a fresher, then keep the whole days off, because this practical is really massive. And as I've said previously in the previous lab, that go and see the object programming video. So in case you have not seen that, probably what you can do is that you can stop seeing this video for now, go back and see the object programming videos, and then come back and restart this lab. Okay, so what we'll do in this lab. So now let's say that your customer is happy with this application, he uses the Windows form, he likes it, and things are pretty settled. But now let's say that the customer comes with one more demand, and he says that he wants this application to be accessed over the browser from any location, from any country, over the internet. In other words, what he's asking is that he's asking a web web version of this application. Putting in more technical words, now what we have to do is that we have to go and create a ASP.NET application, and this ASP.NET application will have the same kind of user interface how the Windows form has, and the users who are interested to go and browse this application from the browser can use that web application project, right? So let's go ahead, open a project. Let's go ahead and add a simple ASP.NET web application. Let's create the same kind of user interface how we have created for the Windows form, and let's try to make this application running over the internet. So here's our project, the way it is structured till now. So we have the customer data entry screen, which is nothing but our user interface, and this customer data entry screen user interface uses the data access project to connect to SQL Server and do insert, update, and delete operations. So let's go ahead now and go and add a web application project, because as we said previously that the customer now wants to create one more version of this project, which can be accessed over the internet. So in other words, we have to go and create a ASP.NET web application project. So let's go ahead, right click, add new project, and ensure that you have selected the Visual C# node, and over there you can see that till now we were always creating the Windows project. Now we have to go and create the web project. Let me just select the current version, that is .NET Framework 4.0, and let's go ahead and create a ASP.NET empty web application. Okay, and this project name we will keep it as, we'll name it as customer data entry web. You can now see that there is a third project here called as the customer data entry web. So previously we had two projects, that is customer data entry screen, which was the Windows user interface, and then we had the data access layer, which used to connect to SQL Server to do insert, update, and delete operations. And now we have one more project, that is the customer data entry web, which will help us to enable this application to be seen over the internet. So now let's start migrating one screen by one screen to this customer data entry web. So what we'll do is, let's start with the first screen, and that is the customer data entry screen. So let's go to this customer data entry web, right click, and let's go ahead and add a new item, and we'll go and add a web page called as customer data entry.aspx. So I'm going to say here customer data entry.aspx. Now the ASP.NET page, right, the architecture of the ASP.NET page is very much similar like how we had seen for Windows form. So if you look at the ASP.NET page, it is divided into two parts. One is the look and feel part, and the other one is the behind code. So you can see that the look and feel part is nothing but this HTML, which you see currently on the screen, and the behind code is nothing but this .cs file here. So here's where we write the behind code, and this page actually defines the look and feel. Now this architecture is very much similar like our Windows form. So if you remember right, this was our Windows form, this was the look and feel, and the behind code of the Windows form was placed in the .cs file that is over here. So the page architecture is very much similar as we had seen for Windows form. Now, in case you are new to HTML, our suggestion would be to go back and see our 1-hour video which we have created to make you understand HTML. But in case you already know about HTML, you can start seeing the video ahead. So here's our customer data entry.aspx page. Now first let's go ahead and start designing this page here. Now you can see that when you are on this page here, there are 3 modes by which you can open this page. So the first mode by which you can open the page is nothing but the source mode. Now the source mode, when you open the page in a source mode, right, what happens is you can actually see the HTML code over here. The second mode is the design mode. Now the design mode is nothing but it's more of a visual mode. You can actually see the controls here. You can visually see the controls over here. In other words, you can go to your toolbox here, for example, and you can drag and drop a some kind of a label here, and you can actually visually see how your design is actually shaping up, right? So if you go to the source mode here, you can see the code for the label, but when you are in the design mode, you actually see the label visually. So now let's start designing the screen. So what we'll do is let's look at the FRM create customer screen here, and let's start designing this customer data entry.aspx accordingly. So what I'll do is so here's the screen. So let's first go and put customer name and country name. So you can see that I have put a label already here. So in this label, I'll just go and say, okay, this is LBL. Again, don't forget the naming conventions. So LBL customer name, and in this label we'll just display the text that is customer name. Great. So here's it. Now the next thing we would like to put is the text box. So let's put a text box which will actually take customer name, and this text box will name it as txt customer name. Great. Save this. In the same way, now let's go ahead and put the country name. So the second field is a country name. So let's go ahead back here and let's name this label as country name. Again, don't forget the naming conventions. So LBL country name. Now country name is a drop down, so I'll just go and take this thing, drop down list from the toolbox, right? So this I'll name it as DDL country, right? DDL countries, because it's going to hold a lot of countries. Now in order to add countries to this drop down, you can see that there is a property here called as items. So select this, and you can see at the right hand side there are 3 dots here. So click on this and we'll say, okay, let's add the first one as India, second as USA, third as Nepal. So I've just added some countries here, right? Great. Save this. Now one of the important points which I would like to bring to everyone's notice here is that as I was visually designing this screen, right, at the back end Visual Studio was going and creating the necessary HTML. So you can see that basically when I drag and drop the country drop down here, you can see that the country drop down DDL countries code over here. When I went ahead and I added India, USA and those countries over here, you can see that those were added as list items. So as you are dragging and dropping and creating the screen visually, it emits out the appropriate HTML at the back end. So let's move ahead designing the screen. So now what we'll do is we have already created the customer name and the country name. So let's go ahead and add these 2 genders here, male and female. So let's go back again to our visual design mode. Let's go back to the toolbox and we'll add 2 radio buttons here, one for male and the other one is for the female. So this will actually help us to define the gender. So let's go to the properties. So this radio button will name it as male. The next radio button will just name it as female. Great. In the same way, now let's go ahead and add hobbies. So if you remember, right, hobbies is nothing but it's actually a checkbox. So we have reading and painting. So let's again go back here and let's go and drag and drop 2 checkboxes. So one is for reading and the other one is for painting.
So this checkbox we will name it as reading, okay, and the other checkbox we will name it as painting, right? Right click this, properties, and painting. Great. To save this, let's again go back here. So the next thing is again married, unmarried. What I'll do is I'll go back here and I'll just go and copy these two radio buttons, Control C, just make a enter here, Control V, right, and this I will say as married, and the other option button I will say it as unmarried. Great. And now let's also add three buttons here: add, update, and delete. So we have the button here. Again, I'll just press enter. So where is the button? B for button. So one is for add, the other one is for update, and the third one is for delete. So let's go ahead and put proper naming conventions again. So this will be BTN add. So this is add. The next button is BTN update. So this is update, and the last one is BTN delete. This is delete. Great. Control S. Nice. Now I do understand that the alignment is not proper, so for now we'll just keep it as it is. We'll afterwards we'll go and fine tune the alignment. So for now this is pretty nice. Okay, so our screen is almost ready there. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this project, this web project, and at least see our screen in action inside the browser. So in order to run the project now, you can see over here in your solution, by default, if you now do a Control F5 or F5, right, the customer data entry screen project will run. That means the Windows Form project will run. You can see that this customer data entry screen is currently bold. So that means, by default, currently this is the startup project. But we want to actually go and run the customer data entry web, right? So select the customer data entry web, right click on it, and say that please run this project as a startup project. Okay, so I'm going to go and set this as startup. Now once I do that, you can see that the customer data entry web has now become bold. Okay, so and the customer data entry screen is now a normal it is having a normal font. Okay, so now this customer data entry web is a startup project. So let me do a Control F5. You can now see that it has ran the application, but it is just showing me some kind of a folder display here. Why that is happening is because we have told him to run the application, but we have not told him which one will the startup page. So we have said to the solution, okay, which is the startup, the startup project, but for that startup project, which is the startup page, we have not defined it. So what I'll do is I'm going to go and right click now on this set, the customer data entry page, and I'm going to say that set this page as a startup page. So if I do that, and if I again do a Control F5, now I should be able to see my screen running. So there it is. So there we can see the screen running, but with a lot of problems. The first thing is, we are not able to see the text. This is a male or a female, married, unmarried, and reading, and those things, right? The hobbies text. Okay, so we need to go and do some fixes. So let's again go back to our code here. Why we don't see a text is because we have not defined a text. So if I right click on this male over here, right, you can see that the text is empty. So I'm going to just say, okay, this is male, this is female, this is reading, this is painting, this is married, this is unmarried, right? So now